AI might sound like something for the IT team or the innovations lab, but if you're an auditor or a systems implementer, it is already closer than you think. From predictive maintenance, smart dashboards, AI assisted decisions from HR, customer service, safety reporting, artificial intelligence is quietly showing up in every system we audit. So the question is, do you need to understand ISO 42001 to keep doing your job well? So let's explore where AI is already influencing the audits we lead and what that means for our role as auditors. Welcome to Lead the Standard. Hi, welcome to Lead the Standard. Thank you for tuning in. Today we're exploring ways to lead well, audit smart, and make ISO work in the real world. I'm Kelly Taylor, and as always, here with the thoughtful and insightful Jackie Stapleton. Hi, Jackie.
Thank you. Sorry, that makes me laugh every time. Yeah.
I'm questioning it. We've had a couple of moments today
You're the
already.
only one that refers to me as thoughtful and insightful, but I'll
Look,
run with
maybe
it.
it's 'cause it's scripted. I don't know.
I didn't write
Um,
it.
no. So today we're actually going to talk about something that might feel a little bit unusual in the usual ISO landscape, artificial intelligence, and more specifically ISO 42001, the new management system standard for AI, and why you, the listener, as an auditor, might need to start paying more attention to it. So now this isn't about turning us all into AI experts. It's about recognizing the growth influence that AI has on systems that we already audit or that people are already implementing. Whether that's shaping decisions, generating records, introducing new risks and responsibilities. So, Jackie, you've mentioned that you've been asked some really great questions lately about what this does mean for us as auditors. And I believe today you'll be sharing some very practical crossovers between 42001 and the familiar standards that many of us are working with every day. So, did you want to kick us off by sharing the event that started you along this topic?
Yes. It was sort of a pleasant surprise as I worked my way through, like, what am I going to write about this week? And I did refer back to a Zoom I'd had, I think it was that week or the previous week, with Cert Better. We'll put the link in the show notes. And it's a great group to join. They have a Zoom, I think, each month, and it's a all group of ISO consultants that get together and I'll say discuss, hopefully positively most of the time, our industry, etc. And the topic was AI, or 42001. And I listened with interest, and I was thinking that, well, I don't audit 42001. It's not my thing. I audit 9001, 14,001, and 45,001. But then I started to think, well, hang on a second. We've AI has sort of weaved its way into everything that we do. So as the original auditors, say, in those triple cert, quality, environment, OH&S, what does this look like for us? So there, I wanted to explore where the elements of AI and therefore 42001 sort of just weaved its way into everyday business, which is then, as auditors or consultants in this world, we're going to be exposed to. Because as you mentioned somewhere at the beginning, like it's sneaking in everywhere. So you don't actually have to go external to use Claude or ChatGPT. It's embedded. Well, just Google. It's just embedded. If you use an Apple phone, it's your AI summary in Safari. So it's just there. Oh, Facebook, I actually, it summarizes the comments, so you don't actually have to scroll through yourself. So that's what I thought of when Kelly, you mentioned it's weaved its way in. So as auditors and consultants, sort of just still in quality environment and OH&S, we actually need to be very aware of how it's weaving into the businesses that we're auditing. So that's the rabbit hole I went down. And I actually said to you, Kelly, before we started this, I thought, oh, this turned out to be really interesting as I continued to explore it. I don't think this is where I intended to end up.
Yeah, that's what's called a rabbit hole.
But as I started looking at, well, how does 42001 AI impact my job as a IMS auditor, the traditional IMS auditor? Yeah, I uncovered some areas and I thought, oh, that's actually true. And as I said to you, Kelly, I'm sure you've got some great examples to add
Yeah.
as well to what I've come up with. So, as I said, I went down a rabbit hole. The more I looked at 42001, the more I realized it's actually not separate or tech heavy. It's well, and it shares the same management system structure, so that harmonized structure that we're already familiar with. But where it became relevant is in how AI starts influencing, I guess, the processes that we audit. And that's what I mentioned, but in a different way, of quality, environment, and OH&S. So, and what we have to be aware of, in some cases, it might introduce new risks, new decision points, or decision actions. And this is a big one: new expectations for evidence. So, yeah, what does that evidence look like? How was that evidence generated? So, while we're not auditing AI itself, like 42001, we're already seeing its fingerprints across the systems that we audit every day. So that's, yeah, I came up with a bit of a table. I know it's a bit more detail than the normal visual model I can't come up with, but I felt it needed a little bit more explanation. So did you want me to go through it? Okay. You just want me to hurl into it. So what I did, just to give everyone some background, and I'm sure there'll be a link, and probably the table should be up showing if you're watching it on YouTube, but there should be a link also to see the original article and the table itself so you can follow along. So all I did was go, okay, what are the clauses that we audit? So as we all know, it's from clause 4 through to clause 10. And then I started to explore what the crossover was. And then I thought, well, what might that actually look like for us? So what are we looking for? Okay, and this is where, Kelly, I think I'm going to rely on you for other examples, because
Yeah.
two brains are better than one, and I'm sure
I
you'll
don't
you'll
know.
see. Maybe not our two brains at the moment, but yeah, I've tried to give some examples here of what that might look like, and this was very eye-opening for me as well. And this sounds nerdy. I'm really looking forward to my next audit because I feel that I'm a lot more aware now of this. And
Yeah.
as an example, I know the audit that I'm doing next month, they use HubSpot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we use HubSpot at Atoll as well, and I know there is AI fingerprints
Everywhere.
everywhere in HubSpot. So I'd be really
Yeah.
interested to see, well, where are they using AI? How are they managing it? How's it integrating with humans, etc. But
Are
and
they
decision
aware?
make. Sorry.
Yeah. Are they aware of those
Oh,
things themselves?
exactly. And that sort of comes into leadership as well. So that's why I thought, oh, look, I know it's a bit longer than usual and a bit more detailed, but I felt it was good for this discussion. Okay. So,
Agreed.
and we might find we start feeding into each other as well, because as you know, the standards all interlink, but let's see how we go. So it started off, of course, with clause 4, context of the organization. So that crossover focus is about identifying how, because remember, context is those internal and external, I call them influences on the business. So the crossover focus, I thought, was somehow about identifying how these emerging technologies and these AI tools affect the system's purpose, scope, and risks, which is where context comes in, which is essentially what Kelly was mentioning before when we talked about how HubSpot is, it's weaved in everywhere. It's about, okay, well, what tools are we using and what are these influences on, I suppose, our strategic direction, the scope of our system, and what additional risks does it bring into what we do? And some of the examples, remember, these are just examples. As I said, I'm sure Kelly will have some. I'm sure you as a listener and watcher will have some of your own. This is just to sort of prompt your awareness and thinking. So I thought if we're using AI in customer service, which sort of feeds into what I said with HubSpot, HR as well, and you've probably got some great examples in that world. Risk assessment as well, like we could have, well, there will be already out there a tool that will assess risk based on what you input as your activities, products and services, how often the activity is conducted, etc. There might be some sort of tool already out there that does it. So having these AI tools at this high level context, we have to consider then, well, how does it affect, I suppose, our system as a whole? So remember, context is still quite high up. This is the influence on your quality environment and OH&S system as a whole. I'm not getting down to the operational stuff yet, which is clause 8, but you'll see whatever you learn at this context level, and don't forget, context is needs and expectations of interested parties as well. So instantly, ding, 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 there's some light bulb moments going off in my head there. So this is, okay, what are these high level influences on the business that could filter through and introduce new risks and opportunities, though, don't forget.
This is, I think, where that rubbish in, rubbish out becomes very important, because, as you said, everything at this level is going to filter down. So if you've got inaccurate or incomplete or irrelevant data that you're using in these systems at this level, that's going to have a not so fantastic flow on for every other element, as you said, clause 5 through 10. So when preparing, well, if intentionally using AI, I'll use that goal. You need to be really intentional and clear and provide context as to exactly what you're looking for. I think you've got in your notes in your table there, poorly trained models could introduce new risks. So yeah, a lot of people are using AI as the solution, not as a tool. So this is where you really need to make sure that you're using it as a tool and not your answer, and you're giving it all of the nuts and bolts and everything that it needs, because those are really high risk areas. You said customer service, that's all your interested parties, internal, external, HR, that's a big one, and general risk assessments around anything safety, etc. So I think this is the space that you've really got to get that.
Yes, and I like what you said. I know while this is clause 4, which is context of the organization, but what you said was when we're intentionally using these systems that have AI embedded or are AI, you have to give it context.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the name itself helps you to think, oh, so I haven't just plugged it in and it's just generic. Yeah, what's the context? And you might have to continue to tweak that to get, as you said, good stuff out, because rubbish in, rubbish out.
Rubbish and
Yeah.
rubbish. And with one solution, you might put your data in there specific for HR, but then later you're looking at external interested parties. They're two different things. The same information is going to provide different, well, the same results really, and you
Yes.
want different
And
outputs for those.
I suddenly thought when you said interested parties, obviously, if we're using third parties, and you may have come across this recently with Atoll, that's what sort of went off. It's like,
I'm behaving today. I'm waiting till my turn.
yeah. So I thought we had to, I don't, we were prompted to go, oh, if we're using third parties for something, we need to ensure that our interested parties are aware of this. Is that a thing? Am I remembering right? You've had to do something similar to
Yeah,
that
yeah. So,
recently?
yeah, and this will impact a lot of people. So, Microsoft made changes to their privacy policies, and obviously that meant that we had to make changes to our privacy policies, and then how that impacts people and what other systems we use that Microsoft might be influenced by, or may data may be capturing it. I'm not the right person to talk about that in full detail, but I know that there's a lot of question around Google Chrome and how it's and Gemini are using information in different ways to different platforms, and that all needs to be considered as well. So yeah, being aware, and thankfully we have an amazing SEO manager that keeps us on top of all of these sorts of um,
Changes.
what's the word, search engines and all of those sorts of things, their privacy requirements. So yeah, you need to be focused on not just your systems. What is ChatGPT or Gemini, as I said, Perplexity, Claude doing? And actually, this is probably a really important part that I think a lot of people are still playing around with the free ChatGPT. That's open source. Plug it in, and everyone has access to the information you're using to train it. So make sure that when you are using these tools, don't put in any identifiable information. But again, even the paid ones, they're a little bit more closed server, but they're still doing those things. So if you are using these emerging technologies, make sure that you're using something that is secure for your business and you're not sharing that identifiable information. Give your
Yeah.
business a new name. Charlie Brown Inc. is doing this.
Yes, absolutely. That's it.
Copyright disclaimer.
That's a good segue to clause 5, leadership, actually, because you're talking about confidentiality, information security, and what I put down for that sort of crossover focus for leadership was to ensure there's accountability for AI use and its impact, which falls directly in what you were talking about. So it's up to leadership. And remember, we talk about top management, the decision makers. They need to understand and take ownership. Okay, that's a given anyway. But now it also includes for any of these systems or these decisions made around AI that can affect the quality of your output for your product or your service, worker safety, if we're going up OH&S path, and of course compliance to your environmental responsibilities as well. So you can see, while I'm talking about AI, the key about this is, well, how does it influence quality, environment, and OH&S? And leadership still has accountability. Nothing's changed. I think it's just sort of our eyes and minds and ears have to be open more to see, well, how are these new systems and new methods and new tools, how are they influencing what we do, which comes from the context, but it's leadership's responsibility. They are accountable for ensuring that this is managed somehow.
Yeah. Interesting thing that I read a couple of weeks ago now, actually, and frequently before that. It kind of twigged for me when you said environment, because a lot of people when these systems came out, we had real concerns around the impact AI was having on the environment and the amount of, I believe it was the amount of water that was used to cool the servers or something like that. I'm not entirely across that. And there were questions around the environmental responsibilities of AI use. And that was intentional use of implementing that in your own system, not any of this embedded stuff. So I'm curious, like I said, I don't know enough about this, how AI might fit into people's environmental management system, the use of that, training of that. Is that something people do, should, will, can consider, or is it now something that we really have no control over in that space? I'd be interested to see
That's quite
a
a high
separate
level.
conversation on that.
Mm,
Yeah.
it's very high level. And I'm thinking with the environmental compliance, it could be, if we, that's high level, if we come to a, a business level,
Mm,
it's, well, are you using tools to monitor, measure, review, summarize your compliance with things?
yeah.
There's a risk there too. And if you are, and you're using it as a tool, when we're not saying stop, we're
No,
saying
it's being aware. Yeah. Make
exactly.
sure you've got an understanding.
Yes, exactly. So, and that really falls with top management under leadership, right?
Yeah. Can I
So,
just add something in there around that leadership? Again, there's still a lot of people pushing back on AI at a leadership level because of that uncertainty. I think people really need to, and again, we've talked about this before, really do need to embrace it, but make sure it's a tool and there's education provided, because it can really help you make decisions that were challenging before. And eh, the information available to you and your team, it can only be, I don't know, can only be well, I feel it can only be beneficial if it's used properly. But I think at a leadership level, you need to embrace it and provide those guidelines around its use, etc. Don't be afraid of it.
true. That's that important thing, guidelines. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that comes back to the accountability of leadership. Absolutely.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
okay. So obviously what we've already discussed will bring with it some new risks and opportunities, as we've mentioned. So that feeds nicely into clause 6, planning. Okay, so that's actions to address risks and opportunities. It falls neatly in there. So that crossover focus, I thought, for this was that integration, I suppose, of AI related risks into your existing system or frameworks or risk framework even. So nothing's changing in the quality environment and OH&S world as it is. There's just additional things which are the influences from context, these influences from these AI tools as to, well, we actually now need to consider this. So through clause 4, you would have identified certain risks, internal, external. You'll with OH&S and environment, obviously in clause 6, you've got a little bit more around hazard ID, risk assessment, environmental aspects also. So you'll identify even more risks and opportunities, but also now you've got to consider, well, what platforms are we using? And
yeah,
how is AI embedded in those? So, as I mentioned in the examples, like if you're using AI tools, and this is about, well, what risks and opportunities, new risks and opportunities are coming, into our existing system. There could be, if you're using AI tools to create summaries, I mentioned that before, summaries on, I don't know, even customer feedback, OH&S incidents, compliance for environment. If you're using AI to conduct your internal audits, okay,
yeah.
if you're relying on these summaries or predictions and then sort of, well, this is what you should do as a recommendation, how are you managing any potential errors? So where does, and I'm not saying don't use it, but remember, as Kelly and I've said, they're a tool. They do help with our job. However, we still have the knowledge and the competency and the experience to ensure, is that right? It's look, it's done the heavy lifting for me. Now it's up to me to pull this apart and ensure that what we're reporting and what we've identified as these new risks and opportunities is actually relevant and applicable to what we do.
Yeah. I've got lots of examples here. I'm going to try and restrain myself. But the biggest risk that I feel around using AI, aside from the obvious things that we've already talked about, is the risk of rapid change and how quickly these system tools are rapidly changing. And I know for us, I've been away for 3 weeks and came back yesterday, and I reckon I spent half of my day trying to rework out what all of these new, how all of our systems tools that I've been using for years work, because they've had so much change over that time. And then that has a flow on effect to your processes, your procedures, how you communicate with people, how you record things, how you track things. So the biggest risk is pace, the amount of change. And if you're not aware of that, and the relevance of that to your role, your business, your all of those things, you can kind of get stuck down another rabbit hole and, oh, this is a new sparkly thing, let me try that. Well, no, that's not necessarily relevant to our business, or that's going to create a bigger, newer risk. So be mindful of that change, and then how implementing and using and integrating these tools into your business can have that flow on effect into different areas. What does removing this manual process and replacing it with this mean? There's definitely an opportunity there, but you need to balance that out with the risks. The AI tools, we noticed that picked up that I was away. The risk of this project is Kelly is away, and anything that she would be responsible for may delay things. Thankfully, we'd planned for that, and that wasn't it, but it was picking those things up. So there's an opportunity. It's picking up things that may not have been picked up before. So you really need to balance this, I think, again, but review it, check it, make sure that the information coming down from that context is accurate.
I think with your concept of that pace of change, absolutely agree. Because yeah, we open stuff up or we document a procedure and it's different. But also something I've learned is, say some of the platforms we use, they come out with this great AI option to do stuff. And, we can use this example because it's something that you and I both know. It's HubSpot had this great tool to generate social content.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing concept, but what it generated wasn't personal, da da da. However, we have to ensure that we don't just write that off forever, because the rate of change is so great. And we do it here. You don't wait until something's perfect before you release it. This will give people a tool to use, but over time they're going to make that better. And so for me, it's, well, look, I'm not really happy with it at this point, but you certainly don't write it off, because in a month, 2 months, 6 months, if you revisit it, it's like you might go, holy cow, this is amazing. So that's another part of that rate of that, or pace of change. And I've seen this with other tools, like they talk it up and you go and think, look, the concept is great, I love it, but it's not quite right yet. And I think there was a video making tool similar that my business coach was using, and she used and thought, again, it wasn't quite right. Concept was good, but then all of a sudden, within a month, they'd made these changes, and it was like, nah, this is now awesome. So it is a matter of just trying to keep up with it and keeping on checking in whether these tools have improved to the point where they can assist you further.
Yeah, and again, rubbish in, rubbish out.
Yeah,
That's a big risk as well here. An opportunity. The more information we can feed these tools, the better they are going to get for our businesses. But again, the risk to that is giving it too much information and that being shared out into the world. So again, making sure you're aware of what information. I said we talk about HubSpot. I was referring to Asana before. Things that would change. Asana changed twice yesterday while I was in there.
yes,
Um, Again, but knowing how and where that information is being shared. So that's as you've got there, those traditional risks are kind of, it's almost like a bit of a ripple in a pond. You start here, and then we need to think about all of those other things. There's
true.
just as many. Every risk comes with an opportunity. Every opportunity comes with a risk,
Yes.
and we just need to understand, yeah, that starting point.
All this is doing is sort of extending our scope, our awareness. Okay,
Yeah.
so this leads to clause 7,
Mm.
support, which of course we know includes your resources, competence, awareness, your documented information, all of that sort of stuff. So I thought that the crossover focus for this was obviously still about maintaining competence and awareness in the traditional way, as we said before. And this, I suppose, this is the comparison: traditional, and now, take that hat off and expand it a bit more. It's, well,
Yeah.
do we need any further requirements for our resources? So that's our remembering resources are people as well as plant, equipment, hardware, software, competence and awareness as well. Where does these where do these AI enabled like systems come into it? Do we need to ensure that there's additional competence requirements? Do we need to ensure there's additional awareness requirements based on the tools that we're using? So, because if they don't have that competence and awareness, then there's added risk, right? So
Yeah.
again, that falls back on relying on AI summaries, predictions, all of that sort of thing. And then you've got people using it that actually don't know or don't have the competence, awareness on how to get the best out of it, possibly.
Not even that. There's also the competence and awareness around how to spot AI coming in, or the AI bot. So this one here for me,
Yes.
I'm going to kind of spit it a little way. Sorry, mum, but my mum sends me things all the time, or tags me things on Facebook all the time. Look at this, I saw this, or did you know this? And I was like, Mum, that's AI, and she's got no idea. And we can see that in people's messenger, like communications. You get WhatsApps randomly from things. You'll get emails in your inbox. So making sure that people have the awareness of how external AI can impact you as well, but also like those the summaries that are generated, don't take them for face value, because the information may not be correct. We had one the other day that was saying, oh, the risk of this is really high, when actually something was really low, and vice versa. We had that conversation yesterday. Are we at risk, or are we not? Sharing information that's out of date. This person is the CEO of this company. Well, actually, they left 5 years ago, and it's referencing Wikipedia. So making sure that your team is trained. I think that's probably something that, I would say, look, 90% of businesses aren't doing. We're all making the assumption that because people are all learning this at the same time, we're all learning together and understanding, and and we have this competence and awareness. But just like anything, you can't assume somebody's abilities, their awareness around this, and their their knowledge and understanding of those risks that we talked about earlier, and how they can have that flow on impact. So, yeah, I think this one is probably, for me, possibly the most important one out of all of them, because it does, yeah, it does have such an impact on everything else.
I think the important word you used there was assume. Don't assume. Like,
Yeah,
we shouldn't just have these assumptions that people know,
yeah,
when it comes to these systems that, because we're all learning this new way of doing things, and goes back to leadership as well. It's leadership.
yeah,
They're accountable for ensuring that this competence and awareness, is maintained. And
yeah,
again, it will change quickly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, you've just reminded me of something there. Transparency, I think, is important here
Mhm.
as well, because uh, we we can't assume that our team and everything is aware of all the things we've talked about. We've also got customers who are assuming they're talking to an AI bot when they're talking to a
Yes.
person, and they're assuming they're talking to a person when they're talking to an AI bot. So if you are using these tools, be open. I am an AI bot, you're talking to me, let you talk to a human.
Yes.
Or like, be this assessment is marked by a human. We're actually updating our workbooks to say this assessment is marked by a human, or this is marked by AI. Be completely transparent with your team and all of your interested parties about your use of AI. Again, so that they're aware of that quality and there's no assumptions
Yeah.
required.
Absolutely, and that's actually, yeah, a change we have actually discussed, because on a previous episode we just talked about a student thinking that a workbook I had actually humanly marked and written every single word. He thought it was AI, and that's what Kelly and I have discussed. It's like, okay, I think we need to let people know how these, different parts are marked, because there are some elements that, well, they're automatically marked, within our, LMS system. So it is a matter of, I suppose, defining that. And that could be a decision made at that leadership level. Goes back to context as well. So you can see it, how it filters all the way through, which is a good segue to operation. Because this is implementing, this is actually all the things that Kelly and I have discussed so far. Well, now we're doing it in clause 8, operation. So this is that control part of it. So this is where you get to implement these controls for the areas that you've identified that are being influenced by AI, and the associated processes. So you've identified them, and now you can put controls in place. So, if you're using scheduling or monitoring using AI, you need some sort of verification and validation. So they're the controls that I'm talking about. Okay. You could have maintenance tools that they're a predictive maintenance tool, and they read off the sensors. Okay, they could have been around for years, that sort of thing, but now they could spit out, an AI generated summary report. But if they're not doing it properly, either way, it could cause downtime if it was incorrect, or if it doesn't get picked up, it could cause safety issues as well.
Yeah.
So this is where it's about whatever you've identified at that context side of things, in your planning, your risks and opportunities, your resources, and your competence and awareness. Now in clause 8, you get to go, okay, this is what we've identified. This is our strategy. These are our controls, how we're, managing this and ensuring there's a balance.
That's a core word, I think. Balance.
Yeah.
because as I have mentioned earlier, this isn't the solution. It's a support tool. And if you don't have that balance and that application of your knowledge and your skills and your experience at this level, that's where things are going to go really horribly wrong. Once you've implemented it, it's the change can be quite difficult. And again, that rapid change. So monitor and validate, as I said. Like, I think I've got less to say in this operation section than I normally would, because I think everything does happen before and after this stage. It's I think we've got a lot less control over where things are implemented now, given so many support systems and programs people are using are forcing it on us, I suppose, is a way to, it's a pretty harsh term, but you don't really have the option to back out of this now in a lot of places. So, yeah, once it's rolled out, you need to be ready for the next two stages.
Exactly, exactly. And you sort of mentioned about monitoring, and that again feeds into clause 9, which is performance evaluation. And yes, I use verification validation in operation as a control. Okay, that's how you as a leader decide, okay, these are the risks and opportunities we've identified. These are the controls we're putting in place. But the next step is in your performance evaluation, which is where that monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation come into play. So, of course, that crossover between the two is, I suppose, if you're using AI to monitor, measure, etc., analyze and evaluate, I'll throw all four in there. There could be some bias in there. So even if you're using them to review, say, your higher level objectives or your department KPIs or your operational KPIs, even any like errors in your product output, any trends in incidents. So you need to ensure, again, there's that balance, because if you're relying solely and wholly on AI to do that, where's the human element with your experience, your competence? Let's go back up to clause 7, and using your experience and knowledge of what it's summarizing, then you can expand on it. Again, it's just a tool. I feel like I'm repeating myself.
I think we are, but at the same time, I think the lesson that we've learned, or I know I've learned over the last however long we've been using, because there's so much change has happened so rapidly. I don't know when we started using AI, but the biggest thing that I have learned is that yes, it saves you time in planning and implementing, but you spend a lot more time in review, evaluate, and tweaking to make sure that the information coming out is accurate and correct and relevant. And bias, as you already mentioned, that's a really big thing. If you're training something in a positive tone, then everything's going to be positive. If you're training it in a negative tone, everything's going to be negative. So I'll use our customer service report. We were talking about this yesterday, and there was a comment in there around how Australia continues to lead the enrolments and other countries are falling well behind, or something along those lines. That was the output that was shared with us. However, when we looked at that with our knowledge of our business and our understanding of that, those other countries were not falling behind as the output said. They were actually trending upwards compared to what they had previously individually been. So it's not always comparing apples with apples or experience with experience. A new product, it's not working. Well, no, it's doesn't have the same amount of data or information that older products do. So you can't compare that. So you need to really evaluate the relevance of the information and that additional context. Be aware of it. So many times you see a report that someone's just gone, here's the question, here's the data, spit me something out. And it really doesn't have that context that we talked about in that relevance to the business. So KPIs, again, we've talked about this before, the different systems use different accounting methods, for example. So we're comparing revenue apples with apples. One of them was around invoice dates, one of them was around deal close dates. It wasn't giving us accurate information around that because calendar year versus financial year. So you really you do need to spend that extra time to evaluate, whereas before you may not have spent as much time really looking into that
Because
data.
you were the one creating the output. That's
Correct.
where all your time was being spent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
so that does lead us to the final one, actually,
Yeah.
improvement. Which is clause 10. And so, of course, in your lessons learned, or things that have gone wrong, non-conformances, oh, there's something to consider. You could have these non-conformances or improvement opportunities that you're raising yourself within your system, or even as an external auditor or you're a consultant, you could be looking at, well, okay, this AI summary of, this part of your process was actually, incorrect. Let's say not, or it could have been worded differently. So there's an improvement opportunity using the example you gave, Kelly. So it's about, well, okay, we're using it. That's great. But how can we make it work better for us? Okay.
For
And
us.
yes, yes. And that goes again up to clause 5, leadership. So it's not about wrapping again, and this is the same with the traditional side of improvement. It's not about wrapping people over the knuckles. It's about, oh, okay, this is how it's being used. Is there a better way of doing this? And then ensuring that, that's discussed with people and you come up with a better way of doing it. Okay. And it's just this continual cycle that you learn as you go. But now there's just this additional scope. We're pulling in these new systems and methods and tools. It's really no different. It's just that awareness that there's other things that are influencing our outputs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, look, out of all of that, the core words I've picked up are context, awareness,
Yep.
assumptions, and evaluation.
Balance.
Yeah. Balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, not poo-pooing it, but yeah, 42,001 is a bit of a good tool. There we go. Funny that. A good tool to help you, yeah, as I said, understand that. And I really love how you've broken this all down into that table. It is really simple and makes it clear to that how that extra, I suppose, here's an idea. Ta-da. Think of AI as an additional external party. It's the
I
information that you're
like
giving it.
it.
Yeah, well, it's people having conversations with ChatGPT. I know a number of our team members, yourself included, have named your chatbots and have conversations with them. So think of it as an external party, like it's your own little consultant. And how does that consultant influence your business?
Their needs and expectations then, Kelly.
Well, it needs accurate information.
Correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Context.
expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's expectations. Look, I don't know, that might change every day depending on what you
That's
do.
true.
Yeah, think of it as an external
Yeah, I
consultant.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my insightful thought of the week. It's Tuesday, we're done. Let's go.
That I think that might be a social post you could put up out there into the world,
Interesting.
Kelly, and see what people think.
That's a whole
It's a
other
bit,
rabbit hole to
it's a
go
bit,
down again.
that's a bit challenging. Yeah, a bit of challenging people's perception, actually. I like it. Okay, so I'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Kelly's sort of given few key takeaways, and more so words or terms that we use, but I've tried to summarize it myself rather than just the entire table again. So as I worked through this, as I said, I went down a rabbit hole, but I looked at, and I suppose I identified that ISO 42001 isn't separate from what we already audit, or also the AI element. It shares the same management system structure. So there's that same harmonized structure. So that makes it easy for us. The real crossover is where AI influences the processes that we already audit for quality, environment, and OH&S. In context, AI introduces new external and internal issues. So I mentioned about decision making, which is actually driven by data or AI summaries, which of course can affect quality or safety and environment outcomes actually. And then under leadership and planning, I talked about accountability and risk management and how they need to now include AI. I'll say it with different tone because it makes more sense. They need to include AI related risks. Okay, they now need to include, even, emphasizing that. So it could be things like bias, data accuracy, reliability. Then in support, where we talk about competence and awareness and how critical they are, our people that are using these AI tools need to understand, this is good, their limitations and be there to verify the outputs. Okay, that's a big takeaway for support. Within operations and performance evaluation, auditors should check how AI-driven decisions are controlled. So I'll say that again, how their decisions that are being made that are driven by AI, how are they being controlled? And I mentioned like verified and validated, and also how do they control them for accuracy or that bias? Remember, I mentioned bias as a risk. So then sort of the overall key message then is auditors don't need to become AI experts. Okay, we're living and breathing it ourselves every single day. We don't need to become AI experts. We just need to recognize where AI is shaping the outputs and outcomes of the systems that we're auditing in quality, environment, and OH&S, and ensure that they're being managed like any other process. Like there's actually nothing different. It's just a new process. It's a new influence. Okay, I think that's the big takeaway for me. So before I hand it back to you, Kelly, always like to close with, anyone can follow the standard. Why don't you be the one to lead the standard?
Thank you, Jackie. That is a wrap for another episode of Lead the Standard. Today we have taken a closer look at ISO 42001, but through the lens of what most of us are already doing. So we might not be auditing AI directly, but as Jackie, you reminded us, we're auditing the systems that AI is already starting to shape. I've shared my personal takeaways earlier, but again, yeah, it's a tool. It needs balance. Use it as a tool, but it's not your solution, and it's there whether we like it or not. It's here to stay. So thank you, Jackie, for bringing your auditor's perspective into this space and to helping us see where AI intersects into the work that we're already doing. We will be back in a fortnight with some more conversations around ISO career opportunities. They are bigger and broader than you think. So I would love you all to make sure that you tap that follow button so that you are first in line when that next episode drops. It's a great one leading into the end of the year and something to start off the new year with for those of us who are open to ideas. I think that's really important. But in the meantime, if this episode helped you, please, we'd love it if you share it, left a review. leave some your thoughts on what we've talked about today in the comments. All of that will really help others find the show. So until next time, do take care, stay curious, and keep leading the standard. Bye for now.